Welcome to Pilot Kimberly. In this episode, 5 ways to accelerate your PPL and reduce costs. Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and also hit the bell notification so you're made aware of new episodes as they come up. As I said in the introduction, this episode is going to be 5 ways to accelerate your PPL. Now, just bear in mind, I'm not a powered flying instructor. I am a gliding instructor of some 20 years, but none of this video is actually instruction. It's just my opinion about ways that you can accelerate your learning as a person who's quite experienced in adult learning. So don't take it as instruction, and certainly talk everything over with your instructor. Number 1, get your gliding A, B and C certificates first. What? That might seem a strange way to reduce costs and to accelerate your PPL, but here's the reality. A great many airlines and the military look very favorably upon gliding time. That's because it teaches you stick and rudder control, it teaches you the basics of flying, and it teaches you really good judgment, things like glide approaches and emergencies and those kinds of things. Also, think about it. If you have no flying experience, you spend a number of hours in your early flights just learning the basics of controlling the airplane. And you're doing that at $300 odd an hour. You can do it at $36 an hour, $40 an hour, depending on which club you go to. And although if you were to go to a gliding club, one Saturday per week, you might not accelerate your learning, but gliding clubs have intense 7-day courses available. So get yourself on one of those courses, put in 7 days of effort, get your A, B and C certificate, although you might need 10 or 14 days to get your C certificate. It depends how quickly you learn. I have seen people get their C certificate within 7 days, but you'll certainly get enough out of the 7 days to accelerate your ability to fly the aeroplane when you get into doing your PPL. I won't go through my life story here, but many of you who've watched the previous episodes are aware of my history. When I first attempted to do my PPL, I went to my flying school, and my first lesson, we did the entire syllabus. And at the end of that first lesson, because of my gliding experience, the instructor said to me, I could send you solo right now. I really would like to. But unfortunately, you need a minimum of 2.5 hours. So come back and do another lesson. So we'd gone through the entire syllabus, emergencies, radio procedures, stalls and spins, and all kinds of things. The whole syllabus in one lesson, and that was because of my gliding experience. So I did go solo after 2.5 hours. Now 14 years later, I'm happy to come back and start my PPL again for 2 reasons. One, because I interrupted it when I went off to do military selection and then didn't come back to it, and my flying school went bust and none of my records are available. So that's why I've taken up flying again. Now you might ask yourself, what does she know about learning to fly? She's doing her PPL herself. And that's true, I am, but this is my second time around, and also I've been a gliding instructor for 20 plus years, and I've owned my own training business for 12 years and been employed in lots of training roles. So I know how to do accelerated learning, and I also know the skills and competencies required for flying, even though I might not hold all of them. Number 2 is do all of your theory and your exams for that theory before you do any flying. First of all, it clears your head of all the theory stuff. It gives you a good foundation into what the instructor is trying to teach you, especially when you get to navigation and other parts of the training. Also, it demonstrates to you yourself the level of commitment that you're prepared to put in. Too many people start their flying journey, they get into the theory and they go, oh, this is hard work, and they don't go any further. And they waste a lot of money on the flying training. Get in, get the theory nailed. There's a lot of learning to be done. Get it all done and over with, and then go and do your flying. Number 3, and this might seem really obvious, but it escapes so many people. Fly often. Fly as often as you possibly can. And this might require you to bundle up all your money beforehand. Just as I spoke about doing accelerated learning for gliding, going and doing 7 days, that is absolutely the best way to do your flight training as well. If you can, put aside a week, go to your flying school, tell them you've put aside a week. You might need to plan it with them because they'll have a full calendar. But say, how many times can you fly with me? How many lessons can you give me between this date and this date? And if they can't give you enough, say, well, when can you? I would like to do a block of intensive training. When have you got that available? And go and do like as many flights as you can on any given day. You'll need a break between them because it can be quite mentally taxing. And often, half an hour or 1 hour is about as much as you can do. But you might do a morning session and an afternoon session, and the following day a morning session and an afternoon session. You might even, towards the latter part of your training, be able to do 3 sessions. That's if your flying school has the time available. But whatever you do, try to do as much as you possibly can in the shortest possible time. The reason for that is, and you might have noticed this if you've attempted to do any flying or any intense learning, you tend to forget things and you tend to plateau and have ups and downs. And they can really affect your ability to learn if you wait a week or you wait 2 weeks between your lessons. But if you cram your lessons really close together, you can learn much faster. It's the reason why when you're doing circuit training, for instance, the instructor will insist on you doing 5 or 6 attempts in a row, because that's how you get that accelerated learning. Learning happens when you're outside your comfort zone, but not too far outside your comfort zone, and the retention of the information happens best when you do it frequently. So intense training is the answer. Number 4 is use visualization and fly circuits and fly your desk as much as you can. Flight Simulator is good. If you're doing that, that's great. But you know what? In the military selection process, they encouraged us to do visualization as much as possible. Their research shows that pilots who visualize, for instance, flying a circuit and doing all the actions required when flying that circuit, will actually learn almost as well as somebody who's flying the aircraft, and it's a heck of a lot cheaper. So map out an area on your backyard or your porch or something, put something down that you can walk on, a mat or something that represents the runway. Give yourself room to complete a circuit on the left-hand side usually of that, and start walking circuits. When we were in the pilot selection process for the Australian Defence Force, they really encouraged us to do this inside our bedrooms and do as much of it as we possibly could over and over and over again. So what you'll do is you'll line yourself up on the runway and you'll take off, and in the early part you'll be actually trying to remember the things that you need to do to fly the aircraft. And then later on it'll be more the procedural stuff. So think about it this way. Let's visualize you're standing at the end of the runway. Now if you're like me and you're flying a tail dragger, the first thing that you want to do is make sure that tail wheel is tracking straight. So do that visualization in your head. I'm just going to roll forward a little bit. I'm going to get my tail wheel straight. I've already, if you want to, you can start right at the clearances and everything else, but let's just start at the runway for now. And I'm going to go to full throttle. I'm going to push my stick forward at the same time. I'm in a tail dragger. The tail's going to lift up. I'm going to hold that attitude, steering with my rudder, making sure that I've got a bit more right rudder to control the way the aircraft wants to pull. And then we lift off and we climb out at 70 knots and visualize that attitude. If you've had the opportunity to fly, then visualize that attitude. Now, if you haven't had the opportunity to fly, this visualization won't work yet. But once you start flying, Don't just rely on going to the airport and doing your flying training. Come back home and spend as much time as you possibly can flying circuits in your backyard. So back to climbing out. We're climbing out at 70 knots. I'm visualizing what that looks like. I'm going to turn now at 500 feet AGL to crosswind, and here I go, and I'm looking for traffic, and I'm climbing out, and I get to circuit height. I'm going to pitch over, I'm going to trim, I'm going to reduce my throttle, and I'm going to call on the radio, my downwind call. Practice your downwind call during that time. So whatever airfield you're at, for me it'll be Camden Tower, XYZ is downwind runway 24 for touch and go, Camden. Call comes back. And have a bunch of different scenarios. You can write them down if you like and pull them out of a hat. And the instructor, the tower says to you, your call sign cleared to land. Oh, I got my clearance early. Cool. Walk down your downwind, and what you're doing now is you're making sure your spacing is correct, and you go through your checklist. Brakes, undercarriage, mixture, fuel, all the rest, but do it properly. Then visualize yourself coming down to the point where you're 45 degrees to the runway, and do whatever is appropriate for your particular airplane. In my case, that would probably be an almost full throttle off or a complete full throttle off. Checking for traffic, checking the runway is clear. The whole thing. Get in and practice all of that stuff over and over again by walking circuits in your backyard. It really, really helps. Number 5, and it's related to that previous point, is learn all your checklists and learn your radio procedures while you're at home. Again, Flight Simulator is a little bit slow for doing that. So do it by walking your circuits and walking your taxi and everything else. So, start off at your flying school and call up, in my case, call up ground. And, ask for startup and taxi clearance to whatever point on the runway. Imagine yourself, you can do it in your chair if you prefer. Imagine yourself taxiing out and getting to your holding point. And if you want to, you can do the whole run-up procedure as well in your head. And do the motions with your hands so you know what you're actually doing. And if need be, get your instructor to write each of these phases of the flight down, or give you a copy of the checklist or whatever, and write your little processes down. And you can have your notebook as you're going. You say, okay, so now I'm at my holding point, I need to call up, and I need to say the following things. Do all of that process of learning all of those checklists and all of your radio procedures in your head. Now, you're still going to refer to your checklist, particularly when you're on the ground, but those checklists like you're doing on downwind, your brakes, undercarriage, mixture, fuel, instruments, switches, hatches and harnesses, and those kinds of checks, you need to be able to roll them off straight away, and you need to be able to not be thinking about the checklist, which is occupying brain space, but actually doing the check. So that's 5 steps to accelerate your PPL and reduce costs. I'm Kimberly Olsen. This is Pilot Kimberly. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification. And also, we'll have some merchandise coming out very shortly, and we'll be organising a Patreon page. So make sure you keep in touch and watch out for new episodes by hitting the bell icon, and we'll be telling you about that merchandise and that Patreon page in the next episodes.